Scream is so fun. Just something about it as a franchise really clicks with me, something I think is inherent in a lot of Wes Craven's work, who was so much more than a great director of horror. You guys ever see Red Eye? Cillian Murphy might have been slightly miffed to realise this was a schlocky B picture, and he's not wrong, that is what it is, but it's also a masterclass in how to make a tight, efficient thriller with sauce. You see enough of these and you realise this is doing a lot of what those aren't. Everything is established with purpose, characters are played at the top of their intelligence, it ramps up the rhythm of setup, payoff, setup, payoff, setup, payoff, and, because it's Craven, it's got the chops to thematically mess up its charismatic villain because it knows that's what we want to see. Very cheeky. That was the thing about Wes. It was obvious he loved horror, but it was even more obvious he loved the audience, the direct conversation movies have with them, and how to give them what they didn't know they wanted. No doubt another director inspired by the antics of William Castle and his puppet pals. So many disciples. And this wasn't left inside the theatre. The conversation beyond the lobby was equally fascinating to him. Horror as a cultural discussion, the shared language America developed around fearful myths well into the modern day. And it was a conversation he was finally able to fully articulate with the help of Kevin Williamson, showrunner of Dawson's Creek fame, who seemed to feel the same way. Williamson had developed a highly sought-after script in need of a true horror director. That marriage of minds gave us Scream.
Hello?
Presented in 1996 as the ultimate conversation piece around horror, evident right from its first historic scene.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Wow, well the first one was, but the rest sucked.
On the face of it, this is just classically good storytelling. The teenager alone at home on the phone with the stranger, tension rising through the stalker POV shots, and an unattended snack. The realization this isn't what she thought it was as things turned frantic. Mechanically, it's a sound opening, but it's the added layer of cultural understanding that made this sing. To be talking about horror films at the top of its script, to cast superstar Drew Barrymore, plastered across the posters like she thinks she's on the team, and to have us realise this movie was an effort to one-up Hitchcock. This wasn't another slasher movie, this was about slasher movies, invoking the most famous one of them all. And, unlike Janet Leigh, this girl wasn't making it past the first reel. That was just the start of a great, unpredictably sly horror film, and one with a long lifespan. Boy, do I hope this isn't the first time you're seeing this. This wasn't her story. This is the story of Sydney Prescott, a teenager living with her father and friends in the town of Woodsboro, a very typical American suburb filled with some very typical 90s kids in their teens. Tragedy befell Sydney some time ago when her mother was murdered, and the assumption was that they'd found the killer responsible, her secret lover Cotton Weary, and put him behind bars, not knowing the real killer was still at large and hunting more victims. Attracting the media, particularly invasive reporter Gail Weathers, and involving the sheriff's office, with her best friend's brother, Dewey, acting as deputy, Sydney becomes embroiled in the killer's twisted game, targeting her and everyone associated, like her boyfriend Billy Loomis, nerdy pal Randy, Dewey's disassociative sister Tatum,
Bam! Sid! Super bitch!
Stu and the whole Scooby gang. No, wait, that's later. That's later. The killer has a gimmick, of course, wearing a generic Halloween costume, enacting kills with a curved knife while bumping into furniture, and making calls to his prey about one subject and one subject alone: how much he loves horror films.
Name the killer in Halloween.
No.
Come on, it's your favorite scary movie, remember?
And you'd think that'd make him easy to track down, were it not for the fact that, in Woodsboro, everyone loves horror. Everyone seems to know what's up, and they all seem, frankly, insane. Especially Henry Winkler.
Fairness would be to rip your insides out, hang you from a tree so we can expose you for the heartless, desensitized little shits that you are.
A stretch, I know.
I think something laid eggs on me.
That, essentially, was the film's appeal. Scream accepted that the audience of the 90s was more cine-literate and more cynical than the audience before them, especially when it came to horror films. So, Wes put that audience on film, and it's not necessarily the most flattering portrayal.
I heard that they found her liver in the mailbox next to her spleen and her pancreas.
The characters share a voice, mostly mouthpieces for Wes and Williamson, Williamson to talk about films, speaking at a rapid-fire pace and all sharing a lot of the same reference points to a comical degree.
The killer could easily be female. Basic instinct.
That was an ice pick.
It's a satire played straight, a slasher film with jokes, and while I think the film does a good job of delivering enough scares and tension to qualify as a horror, capturing the pure 90s culture of urban myth and carpet bangs, I see how someone could feel it's too detached and too knowing to maintain credibility. This is why the scary movie films exist. The series was already a satire, but the Wayans didn't think it was really funny unless you smashed the audience over the head with a hammer and lit them on fire, and we know enough people clearly agreed. However, that original choice of dialogue is to the benefit of the piece, and why it works for me.
See, the police are always off track with this shit. If they'd watch Prom Night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
For one, having everyone talk like this means everyone is a believable suspect. Sydney, brilliantly played by Neve Campbell, is the only real person who can speak the language, but only because she doesn't like it.
Oh, come on, you know I don't watch that shit.
Why not? Too scared?
No, it's just what's the point? They're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who's always running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door. It's insulting.
She's still somewhat naive and a believable flawed victim, having gone through great tragedy and easily pressured by the realities of teenage strife, but manages to consistently find the strength to push past it, breaking so many of the rules and still managing to make it through, highlighting everyone else as either antagonistic or expendable and making you root for her to succeed.
But she realizes that teen suicide is out this year, and homicide is a much healthier therapeutic expression.
Where do you get this shit?
The actors do a terrific job of maintaining the individual personalities, even as the style of dialogue has them feel as one, playing it completely straight while their actual words make us laugh. It's very much telling us it's okay to enjoy this, that there's fun to be had in horror and the way we talk about it. And I think, honestly, Courtney Cox and David Arquette are exactly the kind of comic actors you needed to be part of that. Very unappreciated what Arquette is doing, and it always is.
Not much of a story here, just a bunch of kids cutting it loose.
Above all though, this is Craven having the most direct conversation with his audience yet, through Williamson's relentless wit. Wes holds a mirror up to us, a distorted reflection of the way we're talking about film, not to criticize us or to make fun of us, but to sort of get us to ask why we do it, what horror really means to us, and maybe what critics should understand about the genre's appeal as well. You'll see people make fun of these insecure adolescents, having to pick apart their world and wink at us, and yet we'll definitely keep having our own horror movie watch parties, where we do exactly the same thing, and not be critical of our own behavior.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. Never, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back. I'm getting another beer. You want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back!
On the one hand, you're laughing because it is fun to pick these things apart with friends, but also because there's a sense that, in doing so, we're telling ourselves, these things aren't real, they can't hurt us, they'd never happen, ha ha ha. To me, it's like Craven is taking that belief and putting it right next to the horrors, very grounded, real horrors as well, and while he lets you have fun with it, he's also telling you be careful, you could be next. It's the reflective aspect I think allowed Scream to last, but what propels that further was the choice to make the villain this absolute diva, Ghostface, named in an offhanded comment,
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
is in my opinion the most sustainable movie villain in existence. There are more iconic horror monsters out there that we love to see turn up over and over.
Fish people.
That's why Monster Squad is a straight 10, seeing the creatures we love all hang out and use their special abilities, like Dracula's signature attack, Dynamite.
Meeting adjourned.
Shane Black wrote this, it shows.
That's why Sean and the guys call him Meow Mix, because her head's shaped like a cat head. But I don't, circus. How rude.
That's the thing. The issue so many of these characters face, especially as they get more specific, is their narrative sustainability within a single reality. Some can circumvent this if they're truly supernatural, trust Wes to be the one who managed this, but many modern villains are finite. You have to keep rebooting or updating them to keep them alive in new contexts, and it strains credibility to have some of them come back at all. A breathtakingly perfect film like Halloween is the only place where Michael Myers makes sense, all and any future interpretations diminishing his currency by default. You can't really get past the final sound of the original ending in any meaningful way, it can't be topped. Damn shame, he should have stuck to Austin Powers. Ghostface, on the other hand, is immortal, and partly because, unlike the others, he's inherently cheap. I can't really talk about that without talking about who he actually was in the movie first, so I'm gonna make an assumption you're watching this knowing the identities of the killers, even if my demographics give me pause, alright? Yeah, okay. Fair warning. The big reveal in the original film was that he was actually two people, Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. Loomis wanting revenge for Sidney's mother's affair with his father, having destroyed his family, and Stu kind of in it for kicks.
It was fun.
It's a really wonderful scene as they go all in on explaining themselves, almost making less and less sense as they go, and insisting films only inspired their creativity, not their motives.
Don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
The intention of Ghostface is purely to evoke the most low-rent, obvious horror scapegoat they can think of, and pass off on anyone else, in the hope that afterwards they can continue to use him to elevate themselves as heroic victims. Instead, Sidney turns the identity back on them, a very cool way to bring things full circle, and, in the end, an effort to take away its power. Once she's in on their game, it's not fun anymore, right?
You really call the police?
You bet your sorry ass I did.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
But instead, Ghostface's power only grows. The identity would become the face of the franchise, living on through multiple sequels, always as someone different, sometimes as multiple killers, and never sharing the same motivation or values twice, not even between collaborators.
We have to finish the movie.
Who gives a fuck about movies?
If you've ever discussed the character, how often do you refer to him as any of the individual killers and not just as Ghostface? A single entity, a him. How often do you discuss his Mr. Blobby-style pratfalls to get whatever kill he can, as if it was a common trait to one guy? That consistency is even matched by the choice to have the killers share a modulator, so he always has the same voice, that of Roger Jackson, always on the scene with terrific range.
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch.
I will tell you my favorite story.
Nothing about Ghostface feels tied to only his original creators. Hell, even the mask didn't come from the film. The face, an existing product the crew came upon by chance long after the script existed, seemingly based on Monk's famous painting.
The first major existentialist statement to later become an emoji.
Like the painting, the mask reflects the universal emotion of horror back at its victims. And, naturally, the audience as well. The true meaning of the word scream. It is because Ghostface exists as a cheap, disposable product with many obvious flaws that it makes him so culturally powerful and accessible to all. A commercialized villain in a franchise about the commercialized nature of horror. Much like Spidey, anyone can wear the mask. And because it's become such an icon you can buy pretty much anywhere, so many people want to, co-signing the tragedy of what happened in Woodsboro whether they mean to or not. Billy and Stu would probably be both delighted and annoyed by the fact their crimes elevated not themselves, but the mask. A cheap toy that became a way for anonymous psychopaths to empower themselves, both allowing him to continue to return as many times as he wants in the ongoing story, and suggesting the audience itself has become the monster. Billy and Stu aren't special. Hell, they're the symptoms of a much greater sickness, where the fans have become the ones in control of the story, dictating how someone else should experience it, like a millennial misery. And that, I think, is a huge part of what has allowed Scream to continue on from that first iconic film.
But this is life. This isn't a movie.
Sure it is, Sid. It's all a movie. It's all one great big movie.
Naturally, I'd only feel this way if I thought those later films explored those values rather than just something I made up in my head. And yeah, as far as I can tell, it seems very intentional. We can't put that down to interpretation. What are you talking about? Anyway. Craven was a fascinatingly moral director who loved horror but was not a fan of meaningless violence, and talked outright about the films as a way to address how horror was being underappreciated as a genre with meaning, in a time where it was being demonized, quite literally. We had the Satanic Panic, where we were told things like horror were corrupting our youth, and that the power of Satan could be found in our cereal or whatever. Craven obviously doesn't believe this is true, look at the movies he made, but he did believe the question of morality in horror was worth exploring. If the movies don't shape the psychopaths, but instead maybe say something else about what we're already thinking, asking if you cross a line when you turn horrific tragedy into entertainment. This is why Scream 2 really works for me, as a film not only commenting on the nature of horror, but on the nature of Scream's success.
It's a dumbass white movie about some dumbass white girls getting their white asses cut the fuck up.
The opening has so many mixed emotions because it's once again Craven's sense of fun writ large in Williamson's script, and the thing about the fans is no longer just text. Remember when I talked about reflecting the audience? Well, doesn't get any more obvious than that. The opening is so bold, sending up not only their audience but their own success, allowing for the critiques made of them in the past to get some air and letting Foreman figure out that this time, it's really not lupus. It's okay, he gets better. For me, this is where Scream proved it had legs to continue on with, because once it started talking about itself, it was able to better position Ghostface as a cultural boogeyman. The Woodsboro tragedy, thanks to Gail's reporting, was now something that could be bought and sold, turned into the fictional movie Stab, and Ghostface suddenly part of a legacy anyone could find out about and take inspiration from. Scream wasn't just a commentary on fans of horror, it was now about fans of Scream, who really behaved like this. And while we have fun with that, we also ask if that's something we should be celebrating. That Scream becoming a franchise is a win for Craven, but perhaps a loss for something else.
Yeah, it is a terrible sort of a trick upside the head of let's take a look at what we're all enjoying here.
2 remains deeply interesting for me for all these reasons and more, even if it's definitely not on the level of the first. The first is nastier, edgier, it's a proper slasher film in its own right with some creative kills. It stands alone whatever happens. 2 is still extremely engaging with a few of those in there. Wes's ability to take the extreme mundanes of a college campus and turn them into wonderful set pieces not going unnoticed, and one sequence in particular I think sits right up there. However, the movie isn't as scary as the first, or quite as intense, as certain returning characters, now presented as a little more likeable thanks to proving their innocence the first time, have a few of the edges sanded down, to the point where one death actually feels more tragic than scary. Personally, I don't actually have a problem with that. That feels like it's doing something right, especially when it still has such banger gags. I just say this all the time now.
Hi! No, I really mean that.
Scream 2 kind of sacrifices its original fear factor for the sake of opening the floor to the debate around unwanted fame, how you deal with the attention that comes from a public tragedy, in a way I think is still shockingly relevant today. Cotton Weary, the man wrongly accused of the original Woodsboro murders, now appears as his own character, clearly messed up by his wrongful stint in prison, but also wanting to find a way to make it count, desperate to appear on TV, as if that's the fix to everything.
Been enough exposure, why would you want any more?
Well, no, I don't know, Sydney. I don't know. Maybe because I fucking deserve a little exposure?
Liev Schreiber plays it just right. His desperation makes him unlikable, the way he pushes for it, where you can believe that he didn't do it, but that the experience has changed him into someone who might.
And all I'm asking for is one little fucking Diane Sawyer interview to maybe get my side of the story straight. Now, I don't think I'm being unreasonable in that request, Sydney. Do you, honestly?
Obviously, Sydney is like, that's great and all, but I really don't want to be a part of this story anymore. Again, the only one who comes across as completely real, which is why it's interesting this film subtly starts to show how the situation is changing her as well, in, honestly, my favourite sequence in the whole series. And not just because I'm a theatre geek, well, okay, yeah, you got me, that's why. Sydney has decided not to major in film, but in theatre, taking centre stage in a production of the Greek tragedy Agamemnon, playing Cassandra, who, if you know your classics, had the ability to see the future, and because all her visions predicted the worst outcomes, was hated and resented for doing so. The implication is that Sydney didn't get this role by accident. Her drama teacher clearly encouraging her to take the position, knowing her history as part of the Woodsboro murders, and maybe capitalising on that for the benefit of his own reputation. Not that he needs it, it's David Warner, okay? He's great.
This is your role, Sid. Cassandra is one of the great tragic visionaries of literature.
He frames this in a very culturally important way, but it reads entirely transactional. The stage even seeming like it's trying too hard. Don't remember my college productions ever looking like that. Where are the stolen shopping trolleys? At the same time, there's a sense Sydney is willingly selling out. It's like she's testing the waters. What if I took this terrible thing that happened to me and got something back from it? Everyone is looking at me anyway. Why shouldn't I be the center of attention? Why shouldn't I girl boss my way out of this? We see what Sydney's world would become if she decided to go down that road, and we also see why, if she takes it, she'd never be safe again. While she would become all-powerful, Sydney would also become a greater target, one the collective body of people would resent and try to hurt, looking for their own sense of power within the anonymous chorus and using her life and all its public details to get it. It's a phenomenal sequence with so many layers, because, for a brief moment, while playing Cassandra, she truly does get to see into the future. And it's not very bright. So, it's particularly interesting when the masks are removed to reveal our two killers, because, in my view, they're not the central antagonist of this particular story.
These days, it's all about the trial. Can't you see it? The effects of cinema violence on society. Like Christian Coalition will pay my legal fees. It's airtight, Sid.
I love the idea that the identity of the killers and their justifications are almost a joke now. Billy and Stu unintentionally inspiring people to feel like they needed a justification in speech in order to be able to wear the mask. Though Nanny G has a stronger claim to the title than the rest.
Mrs. Loomis? What?
Billy's mother!
Warning, she'll kill again. However, while they commit the murders, Cotton Weary, I feel, represents the central conflict. He's not a killer himself, but in the search to be famous, daring to suggest this is a situation he can leverage.
That Diane Sawyer interview's looking real good right about now.
To even joke in that moment, regardless of if he was sincere or not, is not something I imagine Sid takes lightly, which makes me feel like her final gesture to him, letting him have what he wants, isn't just about removing herself from danger.
Consider it done.
She's seen the outcome of that fame, and in offering that to Cotton, I feel she's knowingly condemning him. Which, if you've seen the opening of the next movie, yeah, there's a change in Sid, a shift in her perspective, that they managed to capture without hitting us over the head with the point. So of course, there had to be a sequel. And I gotta say, I do enjoy 3, which went through a lot of turmoil thanks to the frenzy that developed around the franchise, as well as the cuts and changes that ensued as they made it on the hoof, which you can audibly hear affecting Craven on the commentary.
I wanted full costumes. I wanted aliens, damn it.
Fans' obsession with Scream had them attempting to spoil all the story details by stalking the sets and posting leaks online, which led to multiple rewrites and changes on both 2 and 3, meaning there was never a completed script they stuck to. Not until right at the end, scenes constantly being rewritten and plot beats changed often on the day of shooting. Yes, this kind of thing has been going on for a while, okay? This was added to by the impact of the Columbine massacre, which was linked to the conversation around fiction affecting reality and then in turn affecting the choices the team had made. Even though they had 2 movies in the bag already talking about whether or not fiction is truly to blame, certainly shows that they really were thinking about the morality of this all. There's still plenty of contrivances in getting to where it goes, and a terrible haircut that, if you see this with an audience, it gets a reaction. Trust me. The kills just aren't shocking or edgy this time. It really does feel more like a light comedy than a horror now, especially in a lot of the cameos and casting choices, giving Parker Posey the chance to do, well, whatever she wants, rightly so.
That way, if someone wants to kill me, I'll be with you, and since they really want to kill you, they won't kill me. They'll kill you. Make sense? None.
But again, Craven and Williamson still offer the same intrigue as they did in the previous films, seeing their take on the conversation develop, and I think it makes choices nobody else would have done I'm more pleased to see exist than not, with plenty to say about Hollywood.
Nobody's gonna want to work with me. Variety called me a pariah. I don't even know what a pariah is.
Revelations around Sydney's mother, around abuses of power, and the expectation that later installments of a franchise are where actors go to die. I'm choosing all the right words today. At this point, Scream's ability to be interesting is kind of self-perpetuating, especially as Hollywood tropes and trends continue to generate conversation. I particularly like getting even closer to the fiction within the fiction, that the Stab franchise wasn't just a sly wink and nod, but now playing an active part in the story and its effect on Sydney's life. As the reputation of her story grows, raising the opportunities of literally everyone else involved, Sydney becomes more and more reclusive, using her experience instead to actually put some good back into the world as a crisis counselor for young women, again striking that balance between vulnerability and strength she does so well. However, once she's dragged back into the undertow of a new killer scheme, we see her hit by the impact of her life being mythologized, how there is something kind of sick about telling that story in this way and letting her see it, especially with the killer still out there. I really like this moment, so caught up in the action she forgets this isn't her house. Both a great action beat and saying something else about the blending of reality and fiction. The meta nature of Scream makes it bulletproof in a way it does and doesn't deserve. You can reason out pretty much anything it does as a creative decision to comment on itself, coming down purely to whether you personally like it or not, rather than if it really functions for the point it's making.
Roman Bridger, director.
And brother.
Like having the killer be a secret brother who in fact orchestrated the entire ordeal from the first film and set things in motion.
I supplied the motivation. All the kid needed was a few pointers.
That's a contrivance it's clearly recognised in critiquing the nature of trilogies, having to wrap everything up and bring things full circle.
The past will come back to bite you in the ass. Whatever you think you know about the past, forget it.
So it's not unaware of those choices, and while I probably would have liked to see something bigger or more shocking, I sort of appreciate the logic that the original creatives took to get us there, and how there is something nice about someone literally trying to turn their tragedy into a perfectly directed narrative, all at the expense of Sydney's life, with her rejecting the narrative completely.
I still got to make my movie.
Step 3, right?
For me, both sequels' effect on Sydney is the most sure-footed arc, commenting on the effect of the genre's continuing appeal. We see her learn and understand what it means to trust. We see her become more resourceful and more creative, spelled out not in the dialogue but in her actions. And maybe because of those benefits, we get a commitment to a final shot that puts a big smile on my face. While I don't want to spell out the obvious part of this metaphor, I think you get it, the thing I like most about it is the ambiguity of Sid's reaction, which I think again speaks to the audience who were still coming back to Scream, perhaps expecting more and knowing the future of Ghostface could be certain, but not Sydney. As the most grounded character through the trilogy, someone who we really rooted for, there is a feeling maybe she's starting to see the juice in the story herself and her place in it. In being forced through so many pragmatic experiences on the back of this tragedy, it would be weird for her not to be affected by it. Not just more resilient, but maybe appreciative of what she's become and what the story offers. Not because that's morally correct, just something she kind of recognizes. If that door is still open, maybe she'd choose to go through it. Maybe she sees the fun, too. And then, 11 years passed. 3, having exhausted both the creatives and the audience, meant the franchise lay dormant for over a decade, as Hollywood continued to grow and change around it. With many other hot franchises of all kinds experiencing their own fumbles, a reliance had begun on regurgitating classic content in 2 different forms: revivals, which were sequels where a significant time had passed between installments, all the heroes looking considerably aged, and remakes, which were often modern copies of classics processed through different sensibilities. Didn't matter if these weren't any good, all that mattered was that they got bums back on seat on the promise that they were revisiting something that they remember liking. That it had affected horror so significantly, and Craven specifically, was what made Scream look like a property finally worth resurrecting. And while not my favourite, 4 is an effective comment on this exhaustingly recursive culture, existing as a revival, a remake, and most of all, a reminder that nothing is sacred. Really nothing. No, for real though.
The original trilogy is based off of Sidney Prescott. She threatened to sue them if they used her story, so then they just started making stuff up. Step 5 has time travel, which is by far the worst.
There's a lot of things that make this movie a bit of an odd duck. I think it looks a little stiffer than the previous films. A lot of locked off shots, and after getting used to rich film stock, we have a film so shiny it looks like the world is dipped in Vaseline. There's the air of a Hallmark movie to the first half, characters not taking enormous risks, and something about the scale of everything feeling so incredibly small. But all things I do think matter to the movie. As a revival, it does try to show there's been a change, and the culture of the 2000s was this kind of shiny, preppy world where everything was going online, and all the kids wore plaid. I should know. Us gamers, huh?
Nintendo Wii Fit.
Part of the pared-back look is about echoing the original film, taking it back to Woodsboro after the Hollywood adventures and copying a lot of its ideas, though it deviates a lot more than it lets on. Really, what this feels like more than anything is an attack on remakes, the back half of the film viciously ripping into them, which I found very funny.
Name the remake of the groundbreaking horror movie in which the villain...
Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Dawn of the Dead, The Hills Have Eyes, Amityville Horror, Last House on the Left, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, My Bloody Valentine, When a Stranger Calls, Prom Night, Black Christmas, House of Wax, The Fog, Piranha.
Even with the differences in production, Wes and Williamson's fingerprints are unmistakable, from the commentaries to the casting choices, and I think they do a very good job with their new creation, Jill, played pretty effectively by Emma Roberts. If Sydney represents the revival, it's Jill who represents the remake, a recreation of a young Sydney and everything she went through, including all the tragedy that began to pile up so early on. They do an extremely good job of paralleling the two stories, trying to balance the focus so both can matter, making it all the sweeter when we realize this has been a total trick. Really, it seems almost obvious in hindsight, realizing the killers are, in fact, as the kids say, Nepo babies. Am I cool now? After debating her return to the world, a point is made of how Sid's victimhood has become something she's finally leveraged, putting her above even Gale's success, and because of that decision, everything she saw in 2 has finally come to pass. She didn't go as far as Cotton, but there has been a consequence. Her niece only seeing her success and feeling, in the internet age, it's the only path left to take for her own fame to manifest.
We all live in public now. We're all on the internet. How do you think people become famous anymore?
Ghostface once again becomes a tool for someone to try and play the victim, and if she's representing remakes, she's giving us a pretty good idea of what Wes thinks of them. I don't know about you, but I always felt this was making a point. The misguided, damaging lengths gone to try and get even close to representing the original blueprint. Her following the rules so clearly in a way that Sydney tried to avoid, for all the wrong reasons, which makes it even funnier that, in the end, it amounts to absolutely nothing.
First rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
4 didn't really take off, and you can understand why. Craven's heart was no longer in the franchise machine, the stress of having to live up to audience expectations, and a development of brain cancer which left him limiting his activities and no longer choosing to direct, sadly passing away in 2015. Yet, I think there is a bit of magic to his decision to not be so reverential, and with this being not just his final film, but the final image he'd choose to leave us with. Rather than something narratively definitive, the final shot suggests a feeling that he knew where culture was headed. That Scream story and its infinite recursion meant the story would likely last beyond him, as the fans would always win out in the end, but not daring to suggest for 1 minute that this was for the best.
An American hero, right out of the movies.
And recur it did, yet another 10 years after the fact, which is, well, quite something. Craven may have passed on, but there had been an ongoing desire from the crew to return if a full script was completed this time, and after some turnover where the original overlords became, well, no longer busy, the property was finally sold, and plans for a new installment put into production.
What's your favorite scary movie?
The Babadook. It's an amazing meditation on motherhood and grief.
Isn't that a little fancy pants?
By this point, the Hollywood revival pandemic had set in, the trend now to revive films in the manner of 4, a middle ground where it's both a sequel and quasi-remake, evoking things you recognized and, to make things even more confusing, dropping the number. With a new director and writer, and Williamson overseeing as producer, it's hard not to see 5 as trying to readjust what 4 did. Another all-new young cast of characters, the return of the old ones, a few legacy descendants, and attempts to echo things that happened in the original film, or making direct callbacks.
I'll be right back. Yeah.
Well, he's dead.
That surely should suggest this is done, right? I mean, we're doing the 4 thing again, surely it can't work. But I do think there's something here. In fact, I kinda love it.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I prefer animated films and musicals.
I think what works for 5 is that it first of all doesn't erase 4, still feeling like a meaningful continuation of what was discussed there, and even building from elements it introduced. And I think it is very aware of its own endlessly mirrored nature in ways no other franchise can make a point of as effectively. But more than that, it tightens the view again on the villain's motivation, getting closer to the point suggested in previous films that the utility of Ghostface is what keeps the franchise alive, working through the audience to create the story. If 4 was about making a villain into a victim, then 5 is the total reverse. Here, Melissa Barrera plays Sam, protective older sister to Tara. Actually, well, half-sister. Because Sam, you see, has a very different dad. The early twist is that the hero isn't related to Sydney, but Billy Loomis, the original Ghostface, sometimes haunted by visions of his ghostly form. A very old-looking one, but whatever, I guess. I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly how to feel about the performance, but I think she's pretty likable. I thought she was even better in 6, and I get it's kinda difficult when you cut against Jenna Ortega. I ain't seen Wednesday, no plans to, but you know, this tiny powerhouse just opens her mouth to talk and you go, oh, okay, movie star.
On a warm-up question.
I told you I don't know these movies. I don't ask me about something I do know. Ask me about It Follows. Ask me about Hereditary. Ask me about The Witch.
bitch!
That said, Barrera does have a different quality that I accept the franchise needed to find.
I'm caught in the middle of fan-fucking-fiction?
Less tied to the nature of what the leads have been, as someone who doesn't want to be a part of any of this, for good or bad, and who has to be dragged into it not just by the original cast, but by people who are way, way more obsessive.
It's a bummer it's me.
The killers this time, Richie and Amber, are outright fans, people who love the Stab franchise, and who are totally convinced they know what's best for its future.
No one has made a great Stab movie since the first one. Not really.
We decided we'd give them some new source material to follow, you know? Bring it back to basics.
How can fandom be toxic? It's about love. They don't fucking understand these movies are important to people.
There's a lot of ways in which they're obviously wrong, but the thing they're most wrong about is the idea that this is missing a great villain.
There's no Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. No bad guy to keep coming back. But the illegitimate daughter of the original mastermind? No, that's a fucking villain.
The lack of self-awareness just really sells the point. I think by ignoring his role outside of his identity, they make an even better case for the power of Ghostface as the most flexible franchise villain. That the mask itself has to be recognized as the bad guy, not Billy. After 4, which was about becoming personally famous, 5 is more surreptitiously about control over others, about making demands of someone else's story rather than creating something of their own in order to get attention, and doing it through a mask so widely adopted, it's impossible to point the finger at any single person to put an end to it all, and overtaking the original cast's importance completely. Oh, poor Dewey. The claim is that this is honoring the work begun by Billy, but if anything, this just shows how far beyond him the identity has gone, which to my mind feels chillingly like Ghostface as a concept is just getting started. I don't want to talk for him, I'll never be able to do that, but I think these decisions don't conflict heavily with Craven's outlook on what was happening to the audience, with some attempt made to keep him a part of this story. Perhaps it's overly reverential in spots, that we even have a character called Wes, geez, but I didn't feel a line was crossed, using the character, who's pretty well drawn, to do a reversal of Psycho, and then using their death as a long setup to get to this particular framing to happen. One I think these two have earned. I dig it.
I still prefer the Babadook.
If anything, the way 5 plays out feels like they can finally put the blueprint of the original film to rest, meaning all bets were off as the franchise marched on towards yet another sequel. 6 is probably the lesser of the two films, but I still think it has some very effective points to make, and depending on my mood, I might even call its opening one of the best.
This is not the first impression I wanted to make on a college professor.
Oh, associate professor, and it's just film studies.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
If there's something 5 and 6 do really well, it's capturing the way we talk about films now, though 5 doesn't really stray from the original context. 6, however, does, feeling like a leveled up version of the original as a new kind of modern horror story, especially as a dating thing, and in a weird way, kind of recreating a trick from 4. I think it does a much better job of showing how much the rules don't apply, reaching absurdist heights that made me feel, if I'm honest, kinda high.
Who gives a fuck about movies?
5 being as good as it was allowed them to coast on a gimmick for 6, Ghostface in the City, like Babe. The ad's doing a great job of selling that and justifying the film on poster power alone. Even people who don't like this one can't deny the excellent window sequence, not the most out there idea, but certainly the one closest to the appeal of those Final Destinations kits. I don't think it all works. The style of violence cited is maybe conflicting with Craven's conception of morality within the franchise, or that the final reveals have much weight to them at all. These goobers didn't do that much for me. But I think it continues the conversation of 5 in a way I still found compelling, especially if this leg of the journey is more about the villain, where I think at some point you have to accept you're baiting something that's not going to be what you maybe wanted at all. 4, 5, and 6, I feel, share a connection in that idea of what the next generation is even supposed to do with this information. All this stuff handed down to them, and that culminates in 6's crowning visual, the Ghostface Shrine, a reverse of the imagery in the original sequel where we see Sidney's life as a star on the rise and the promise of an all-powerful future. Now we see the stark reality of the future itself, that obsessive fans are showcasing the lasting legacy of the killer, the real attraction to the franchise for some. There's a little comfort in the way the costume has outshone Sidney's life, present in spirit, if not story, only as background dressing. Not that this was a creative choice, but really shines a light on how Richie got what he wanted, a villainous presence, even if it comes in the form of old videos he made on the internet. Which, yes, really is Jack.
So you guys are thinking that I did post a holiday special?
Not that I'd know anything about this, obviously. There's something unsettling about the idea of logging the minor defects between these cheap, mass-produced outfits. Our need to have to wikify everything, the kind of thing Wes would have absolutely picked up on. I think what this highlighted the most to me, however, was the struggle of ownership that's now developed. I've talked a lot about the audience taking on Ghostface as an identity and how often they claim to be doing it to honor a legacy, but they've never had to actually confront it directly. The killer's dying every film, and leaving new killers to interpret the situation however they choose. But you know, that opportunity for a confrontation between the past and the future is still possible, and I began to realize these later films seemed to be teasing an elephant in the room, one that had been present since the end of the original. The constant talk of Billy Loomis, the idea of his legacy as the first killer, the one who had to be talked into committing the murders, the one directly tied to Sidney, the one who kicked it all off, Billy.
Who was the killer in Stab 1?
It's Billy Loomis, and he was Sidney's boyfriend, and he was played by Luke Wilson, and I got you, asshole!
Only he didn't do this alone, did he?
The correct answer is Billy Loomis and Stu Marker. There are 2 killers in the original Stab.
The thing the very first scream made clear was that Ghostface didn't belong to Billy. Stu was as responsible, if not more so on occasion, clearly the crazier of the two in a fantastic performance from Matthew Lillard, able to play both believably reasonable and totally unhinged, though the signs are there if you know what you're looking for.
I didn't kill anybody. Nobody said you did. Thanks, buddy.
We never know if it's Stu or Billy who makes the first canonical kill, Maureen Prescott, and who kills who is the subject of great debate all round, but we do have evidence that the first on-screen kill wasn't at Billy's hands, but Stu's. After all, Casey was dating him. In the end, Stu was the first of the two to die, by the very medium he loved, no less, but there's no reason to believe he actually died at all.
TV that killed Stu Marker.
If you believe he's dead.
3 was the only film to feature a single killer, but rumours persisted, mostly spread by Lillard, that Stu was also planned to return in 3, alive and well and now with a much better reason to wear a mask and maybe justify that R rating. They didn't follow through on that, but it opened the door for actual fans to speculate and wonder if Stu was always there. There are a few inconsistent kills that could be explained away by Stu never leaving the role alone. When Lillard was dating Neve Campbell during the filming of the sequel, he actually appeared as a joke in the background as an extra, which you're welcome to add to the pile of evidence. In fact, I got the sneaking suspicion Stu being treated as a runner-up to Billy in 5 and 6 was very deliberate.
I got Stu Marker's mask. He was my favorite.
The constant talk of Billy and his legacy over Stu's as the central figure is undermined often by the times Stu's contributions are also present. In 5, there's this great shot where we realise we're in the original house where the murders were committed. But do you guys remember whose house that actually was? How about the shrine in 6? The collection of Ghostface costumes with Billy front and centre. How do you think Stu would feel about that? Perhaps the biggest clue to me was the fact that 6 featured the most active Ghostfaces in the franchise, or at least people who kill while wearing the costume. But the number only adds up to 5. Come on. Oh wait, there was going to be 6, wasn't there? Almost as though the films are goading Stu into a response, which would dovetail beautifully into the messaging about fandom at large. There's precedence in the desire to do this, Matthew Lillard having been vocal for years about wanting to return, and kind of undergoing a subtle renaissance in popularity. But I think the need to do it and comment on the matter is something the series is just naturally heading towards, namely the idea of canon becoming a marketing tool of its own. More than once the series has pointed now not just to horror films doing all of this, but to the likes of Star Wars, how even this huge franchise has attempted to return and pay lip service to deep cuts only committed fans would even recognize, which is like a joke now. How that appeal, in an age where anyone can access that info online, is less impressive and more shallow. That feels like as good a reason as any to play this trick with Stu, to have their cake and eat it with a character who I think would be able to criticize his own reason for coming back, under the one mask that feasibly allows it to happen. That maybe he didn't appreciate the potential of when it was first devised. Listen, Palpatine ruined it for everyone, okay? No reason you can't put Stu on the big puppet crane either. But is this really what I want? Am I not falling into the same trap as the others? Who am I to talk about the villains wikifying the law as a red flag as I attempt to wikify the idea of any accepted legacy in a video? All of these are rhetorical questions. I know I'm the bad guy. That's the twist to this version. Didn't you see it coming? It was so obvious. It's not really about quality anymore. A franchise can subsist entirely on expectations of possibilities, by people like myself who platform their opinions on the franchise almost as a way to be seen as part of it, and validate all this stuff they're carrying. No doubt I'll be part of a murderer's row row of videos on the subject, especially in any October, especially just before a future installment arrives in theaters. Me attempting to capitalize on the small window of opportunity where we don't actually know what's going to happen next, where nothing I've said could be in play at all. I'll stop myself there, shall I? This is the power the original film offered. Scream wanted to engender a feeling of audience participation, but in giving that, they opened a door for them to assume some level of control. On one hand, that allows the franchise to perpetuate and offers a platform for the creatives involved, but on the other, it means the fads pretty much have to become the villains. A legion of faceless bad guys who are forcing this thing to stay alive and just won't die, replaced year after year, always with a new set of expectations and demands, until it all goes away. The genie's out of the bottle. You think you're gonna stop people dressing like this? Not until people stop in general. I'm very much someone who believes things should end, but also recognize value in things that defy that on purpose, which Scream very much has done, sacrificing its integrity to critique our own. It's healthy, really. The original film was a send-up of the idea that horror films create psychopaths, that movies actually serve as a way to deal with processing tragedy and empowering ourselves, and what it has become is a way to process all of our reactions to film and tempering our expectations. Sidney Prescott may roll on, but her arc is done. An example of resilience in the face of constant tragedy, whose story, at this point, cannot be ruined by something so fully outside of her control. And the same can be said for Sam and Tara, who very much ended on their terms. The perpetual desire for the franchise now rests on the treatment of Ghostface, and in somehow finding closure not for the character, but for each generation of horror fans who want to find their place in this culture, and to warn them of the consequences. Haven't seen the series, but I'm gonna take a wild guess that some of this is touched on there too. Scream's legacy is not as some untouchable, wonderful, prestigious franchise. It's the lowest common denominator, the need to push the obvious buttons and do everything other franchises live in fear of. Kinda like Fast and the Furious, actually, though more intentional. Future installments never break the legacy of that first film because, in a way, that is the legacy. To be broken. Wes and Williamson's brilliance was that they didn't just confront the audience about horror films. They invited them into the conversation and built both a critique of the culture and an inseparable part of it. There's a lot of people who love it for all these reasons, but, crucially, there's a lot of people who see these as slasher films and nothing more. They'll take the characters at face value. They'll criticize their actions and decisions as if they're real people, not directed towards doing things that will make for the most entertaining sequence of events. And as they dress up as this icon to show their appreciation, they'll think nothing of their participation in this legacy, only how much they still love horror movies. That's as intended. That's what's fun. It's all part of the plan.
Designed and directed by his red right hand.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Drew Barrymore dies at the start of this painting, doesn't she? Do you know if they've got Scream 2 in this gallery as well?
Scream 2?